Hey folks, welcome back to the Insight series. Now today we are joined by a good friend Sarah Ormerod from Thryve Nutrition. We're going to talk about quite a lot of stuff in this next 40 or so minutes. We're going to talk about different ways that you can look after yourself during lockdown, little things and common themes that Sarah comes across when she's working with her clients, as well as we touch on just what are the differences between nutrition for men and women. There is unbelievably a huge difference, so please do sit back, enjoy. This one's going to be a cracker. Sarah Ormerod from Thryve Nutrition. Sarah, thank you very much for joining us today and being part of this Insight series.
Thank you, Jimmy.
It's great to see you. How are you doing and how are you coping with the whole lockdown thing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm actually coping pretty well. I think in many ways I'm quite used to working from home and being on my own because I'm self-employed. So obviously things are slightly different, but still working with clients online, doing Zoom consultations, getting out for a run every day, which is great. So yeah, things could be a lot worse. Plenty of time for cooking and watching Netflix as well, which is always good.
Yeah, I think like everyone, you're kind of getting your head around how to work remotely but still reach out to your clients. What sort of things are you kind of doing now consultation wise? I heard you've got a nice wee initiative to help raise a bit of cash for charity as well.
Yeah, so well, I guess I felt like I had a little bit of time, more time on my hands when all of this kicked off a couple of months ago. So, and I was thinking about how I could use my skills and my knowledge to help people at this time. So I launched a wee initiative where I'm offering mini 30-minute consultations to people who need some additional help at this time with their diet and their lifestyle. And obviously being circumstances are different for different people. But in exchange for a donation to the National Emergency Trust Coronavirus Appeal. So people can just pay what they feel, and it gives them a bit of a taster of what it would be like to have a consultation with me. And then obviously I'm doing business as usual with clients and doing consultations online via Zoom in these circumstances. So yeah.
So it's very weird for a lot of people, but that's it's a great way, I suppose, of doing a combination of two things. You're supporting your current community, but your growing community, but also giving something back right now. And I think everyone understands just how unstable life can be right now. Whether you're raising money for a food bank or a trust or even the NHS, it's really important. Um,
Yeah.
but we've came our backstory ultimately is came from the fact that you and I had kind of crossed paths a few times in the last few years, and we had a sit down discussion, and we thought that it would be quite a good idea that you can maybe start working with a couple of our athletes here at Meta. So you ended up working with two specifically. One, and they couldn't be both ends of the scale. You had one who was, expedition, trying to break like a world record for the amount of time taken by a woman to cross the Himalayas all the way through
Yeah.
the, and another female athlete who was purely focused on cyclocross and that short, sharp kind of stuff. So you couldn't have two different athletes to work.
Yeah.
Um, and the great thing about having you, Sarah, as well, is that your background as well, which we'll go on to in a second, is you're very much sport orientated as well. It's not just you're just a nutritionist who reads a textbook. You actually what we like to see is we like to work with people and connect with people who actually practice what they preach. They're still doing it. They're still in the melee at the same time. So, what's your background in sport then? To let everyone know.
Okay, so I right now my I suppose my main focus, I really enjoy long distance running, so mainly off road, so running in the hills. Although at the moment, obviously, that's limited in terms of what I can do. So there's been a lot of time spent around Holyrood Park and long runs out from town to the Pentlands to do a wee loop and then back again. But yeah, long distance running. So I've been running since my early 20s, so about 15 years. But probably about 4 years ago, I picked up a couple of injuries and then I started cycling. So in that time, probably for a couple of years, I found myself in the world of triathlon, and I did a couple of 70.3s. I found probably more comfortable with longer distance endurance based stuff, probably because of my running background. And I'm still kind of keeping that up. But I had a very short kind of foray into racing. And obviously there's no races in the calendar right now. So really just keeping fit and trying to think about maybe some adventures in the hills in the months to come later in the year. So would really love to do some of the famous rounds, maybe a Ramsey round over a couple of days, things like that. So that's my main focus at the moment, personally. And then obviously from a nutrition point of view, I found myself about 6 years ago, having professionally worked in PR and marketing for quite a long time, looking for something different and a new challenge. So I retrained while I had a full-time job, while I was training in nutrition. So I'm now a registered nutritional therapist based in Edinburgh, as you know, and have found myself specialising in nutrition mainly for endurance sports, such as ultra running, triathlon and cycling. So I see people who are doing shorter stuff like 5Ks, 10Ks, but probably because of the community that I am immersed in, a lot of the people who come to see me are generally endurance-based athletes. So yeah, also write for a couple of different publications. Functional Sports Nutrition magazine, I write for them, and I've done some writing for a couple of brands as well, like Red Bull. I quite enjoy that side of things as well, just kind of doing the research, keeping my knowledge fresh, as well as working with clients. So.
Yeah, you need to be really on that kind of the bleeding edge of stuff, don't you? You need to make sure that you're improving yourself, because if you don't continually try and develop and try and move forward, especially, I suppose, in the space right now, because it is ever evolving, and the rate at which things are changing with the whole social distancing, etc., you really, really need to be on the front foot with that sort of stuff. Have you the role in which you've played as a nutritionist has kind of changed since lockdown and been less of a, this is what, have you found you've had to pull people on track a lot more, or be more of a sounding board and maybe more of a counsellor rather than a nutritionist?
Yeah, well, it's a big element to what I do, because I can come on to talk a little bit about this, but my approach to nutrition is very much about getting to know the person. So food is obviously a huge part of what I do, but it's very individual. So you need to kind of understand an individual's circumstances, like what's their home life like, what cooking facilities do they have kids, do they cook for their kids, do they cook for their family, and obviously right now people are finding themselves in different circumstances, their routines changed, so a lot of those conversations come up, and also as well as the food side of things, I like to look at the big picture, so thinking about somebody's lifestyle and their stress levels. So like right now people might have a lot more anxiety or stress in their life if they're worried about their job, they're worried about their family's health, and with lack of routine it can impact your sleep as well, and then that can have that knock-on effect in terms of your eating habits. So it's like this vicious cycle. So yeah, absolutely, that is a big part of what I do, is almost kind of coaching people, because a lot of that is food is tied into people's behaviors, and sometimes when you're looking to make changes, it can be a bit of a negotiation, as I'm sure it maybe is for you with some of your athletes as well when you're coaching them. So yeah, and I kind of enjoy that as well, because you really get to know people, and when you understand what makes them tick, that's really when you can make positive change.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the emotional link that we have with food, because it's almost something that's been embedded in us since we were kids. It's like if you fell over, your granny would buy you an ice cream to make you feel better, and it kind of self-perpetuates from there on. And I think as well, linking this with the emotional side of food and the actual reality of what food actually is, food is the fuel what you should be doing daily, and diet is what that food is. It isn't a. I think the terminology in which the word diet gets thrown around gets quite lost, and also linking that to the emotional side is that some people don't actually realize how connected they are emotionally with food.
Yeah.
I was never really too sure about that until, well, maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer than that.
Yeah.
Be until I was maybe in the kitchen and my wife would walk in and she'd go, "Are you a little bit stressed out?" And I'd be like, "Why?" She says, "Well, you've basically been staring at the biscuit cupboard for the last sort of minutes, just filling your face." So it's like,
Yeah.
maybe I am, but that
Yeah.
a part of that education to make people realize what they do when they are stressed, and how
Yeah.
trigger can affect them in that negative way. Have you got any kind of wee tips for people that you kind of use when it comes to that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So, well, ultimately, if you think about when every time you eat, for the most important thing as well, when you is to make sure that you're digesting your food properly. So, um, if you're not digesting your food properly, you can be putting great food in your mouth, but you're not absorbing the nutrients from it. So I see this quite often. So there might be, people who are eating very well, but they have issues with digestion. And actually, sometimes, there are things that you can do in terms of certain foods that you eat, which might be triggers to digestive symptoms, etc. But a lot of the time, it's simple things like people are just eating too quickly, and not mindfully. So actually, how many times do you've done your training session and you've got like I don't know, a half-hour window to cook and eat dinner, and it's getting late at night and you're sitting down and you're like looking at your phone and you're watching the telly and you're trying to eat your meal at the same time. Like that's, your body's not in the best, so you're not putting yourself in the best circumstances to get the most from that meal. So it's things like actually slowing down, you know taking your time at the table to enjoy a meal. Actually, basic things like that sometimes can be really helpful for people. And also thinking about the wider context. So I talked about stress, and the nervous system, and the connection between the nervous system and the digestive system is huge, and people don't make that connection very often. So it's quite a common thing with athletes who are doing high energy sport, and you're putting huge demands on your nervous system without really realizing it, day in day out, and you're eating great food but your digestion's not great. So sometimes making that connection and actually trying to work on the nervous system and balancing that out through certain nutrients, but also things to relax and de-stress and calm the nervous system down, can help the digestion. So so there's some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think you've obviously kind of led on to that, but the fact that a lot of foods can be inflammatory within the system, especially in the gut, because they talk about the gut being the second brain, and now more and more evident it is that that's really more responsible for, your gut biome is more responsible for your immunity. And I was even told previously by a nutritionist I worked with years ago that the process of how we eat has totally changed, because it is literally processed food. I mean,
Yeah.
things like, he used to say, you eat with your eyes, and what you can do, instead of just picking an apple up and eating it,
Yeah.
take your time with the apple,
Yeah, exactly.
fit, eat the skin, or chop it into bits, and that process actually helps satiate you a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of makes you feel, sounds weird, but it makes you feel a little bit more fuller. And of course, if you're taking the time to go through it, instead of just cracking on through this
Yeah.
apple or whatever you're eating, but taking the time to eat in small chunks and chew food plus times, and make sure that ultimately your gut's not under as much stress, it makes a huge difference in it. And again, it's one of those simple things that when we are crazily busy and we don't have the chance to take time back and really sit down, we want to try and reduce the amount of, like you said, the nervous system stress. So your sympathetic and your sympathetic nervous systems, which are two they're two things that have to be in good rhythm with each other. The way in which we eat, and the habits at which we have when we eat. And I think this also knocks onto kind of sport, when you're actually doing endurance sport and you're having to eat on the go,
Yeah.
can be potentially why a lot of people have stomach issues when they're doing long endurance sport, because they've maybe not done the work in the background about what's good and how to eat it, and what they should be preparing what they're eating as well.
Yeah, well, I listened to your insights chat with Finlay actually, and there's probably there's lots of relevant stuff there related to things that I was going to talk about today. But um, there's that separation between the way I work with athletes is your daily diet, and then there's your, well, how do you feel for your sport? And I like to try and separate the two so that you're basically starting from a solid foundation. So looking at your breakfast, lunch, dinner, meals and snacks every day, and what are they, and are they dense in the nutrients that you need to be at your best? And there's some basic things which can help, I suppose, in terms of that stopping you from going for the biscuit tin. So it's actually the makeup of those meals and what does that plate look like. And it sounds really basic, but actually usually people, if they don't have that in their mind, they don't necessarily think to do it, is that if you're having carbohydrates at a meal, and if you're an endurance athlete, then you probably will be having them at every meal, most of the time anyway, is having a portion of protein alongside that carbohydrate. And what that does, it balances your blood sugar, so the release of the sugar into your bloodstream is slower. So you're kind of more steady throughout the day. You're going to have less of those kind of peaks and troughs where you're craving sugar and you're craving snacks. So it's actually just sometimes educating people about that basic structure of what the plate should look like, what should be made up of. And then once you have that nailed, then going on to, okay, well, how do you train, and actually periodizing the intake of those nutrients around a training schedule with the clients. So those are the first probably two steps that I look at when I'm working with people.
So that's obviously some of the common themes in areas that you kind of deal with on a daily. It's like ultimately what we're trying to do is educate people, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. All the stuff that we are now doing via the channel, and it's great having people like you, Sarah, who are literally walking the walk and talking the talk at the same time. And
my best.
we're all trying to do that. But I think the thing is that you're in it. You've not just read a book and then you're just passing off information that you've read. You actually are really into the white papers. You're really into the studies, and incredibly credible source of information, which is again why we love working with you at the same time. Is there any other sort of common themes that you see across the board from athletes and people that you work with?
Yeah, so I guess probably, well, there's a couple of things. One of the most, they're kind of related as well, a lot of these points, but a common thing, especially with people who they might have been doing sport for a long time, but who maybe they've never spoken to, done much reading about nutrition, or they've started doing a lot of sport, and they're maybe reading stuff from the papers or things that they hear in the press, or it's kind of ingrained habits, is that mentality of calories in, calories out. And actually they might have found sport through that mentality. So maybe, they were looking to lose weight, and then they've actually found themselves in this, they're actually training, they've got goals, but they've still got that mentality, which is dictating their behaviors around food, which is a common thing. And sometimes around that as well, they'll maybe latch onto things that they've heard around certain diets or fads, so whether it's plant-based, or they'll come and say,
the bro science, as we like.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, what's really interesting around all of that is it has originated from somewhere. So somebody's a specialist, and they've done a study in that area, and they, they've got some interesting findings, but then it's kind of disseminated to the mass public, and then they take it as gospel, and they're maybe not getting the best out of their body because they're they're trying to you talked about the ketogenic diet and kind of low carb. They're trying to do that, but they're they don't have an endurance background, they're doing a huge amount of volume and they're not eating carbohydrates. So they're never going to get the best out of their body. So it's actually, I see that a lot with people. And then it's again, just going back to what I said about looking at that foundation and actually re-educating around, before we even talk about your sport and what you do, this is what your body needs to be its best, and then looking at their training and periodizing that intake of when is the best time to eat carbohydrates and how much, around the type of training they're doing. So intensity, or rate of perceived effort. So that would be where it's useful for me to work alongside somebody like you, because I'm not a coach. So as I suppose, as you say, it's useful because I have my own coach, so I have an understanding of what a zone 1 or zone 2 run should look and feel like, and how I need to feel for that session. So I can have that conversation with athletes, but yeah, it's that's quite a common thing. And I suppose related to that is a lot of the people that I work with are, they're normal human beings. They're not, they're not Olympic athletes. So they have a full-time job, a family, a lot of other stress in their life, and obviously stress is cumulative. So they'll be trying to do, mega volume training weeks, like training for ultramarathons or, like weekend warriors, and then not necessarily taking into consideration those other stresses that they have in their life. So that's where that kind of coaching element comes in around, educating around food and what they need to eat to sustain their activity, but also thinking about things like routine and sleep and rest and recovery, and how to build those things in as well. And yeah, so that's quite common.
I
I
think
suppose
what you're
sorry.
doing there is similar to what we do with athletes, is you're taking that kind of that bird's eye view, that helicopter view of what we're actually dealing with right now, what will work for you. And again, as with training, not every person trains the exact same. Yes, there will be overlap depending on what phases of training they're in and what events they're doing. But again, with that has to be bespoke for the person to make it relative, because there's no point in trying to give someone, big, massive hours to do if they've got 4 kids and they're working a 9 to 5. That ain't good. But you have to have the knowledge of the workarounds that you can actually put in from a training aspect, but also that falls very, very heavily on the nutrition aspect as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think with I suppose my approach, I think with sports nutrition, it's kind of evolving a little bit. So traditionally, sports nutrition has always been very quantitative, is probably the best word to use it. So you're looking at macros and calories, and actually, and that's maybe where some of that comes in around, people are like, well, I'm running or I'm cycling, so how many calories do I need to eat, and is it fat, is it carbs, and actually, well, with every individual it's different, so there are some rules of thumb, but the way I work with people is very individualized, and actually you need to kind of have an understanding of, yes, you can look at their activity and you can look at the number of calories that they're eating every day, but how's their digestive system, how's their immune system? So how many colds do they get a year? Like, have they had any serious significant illnesses in the last couple of years? What's their health history like? Because understanding as well, especially with females, what's their cycle like? Do they have one? Because that's another common thing. Because when you have more of an understanding of how all of the systems in the body are working, sometimes they can be compromised because you're doing too much. So you're overtraining or you're overreaching, or maybe underfueling, and then it might be downplaying, affecting some of those other systems. So you really have to have a really thorough understanding of how every person is different and it's going to manifest in different ways.
You hit on a very, very important theme here, Sarah, and it's definitely something I'd maybe like to get you back if we have a chance to get you back on again. The two things you just spoke about there are really important, and first and foremost, when it comes to women's nutrition, and as you spoke about the cycle and all that, and how the osmolality, your hydration and all that sort of stuff on a cellular level changes constantly throughout that monthly cycle. That's something there's not been a huge amount of research done in, and it's actually that if nutrition can do anything to help aid female athletes, it's definitely dig in more to the minutiae of what actually happens during that. And that was something that we kind of touched upon with the two athletes that we had you come in and work with, and they said it made a huge difference to just how they felt in general, their energy levels, and ultimately their understanding of why they felt rubbish some days. Doing the same thing, their body was just maybe resisting against them.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a big topic, as you say. So there's definitely more that can be said around that. But you know, it's becoming, been a lot more in the press, and in the sports community in the last few years around this. There's been a lot of, historically there was something called the female athlete triad, which only looked at women. So that was, you know, a lot of women who their menstrual cycle and their hormones would be affected because they were overtraining and underfueling, and then that obviously has a knock-on effect. If, for example, if you're not having a period, then you don't have as much estrogen in your body, so then it affects your bone density. Whereas now it's actually the IOC a few years ago coined something called RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency in sport, and they now apply that to males and females. But basically what that is you're not taking in enough energy to sustain what your body needs to do your sport. So then, in what I was just saying there, you start to see how that impacts on other areas in the body. So that might be you don't have a period, and actually in RED-S, the oral contraceptive pill is actually contraindicated, because if you're taking the pill, you're having a false period every month. It's not a real period, so you don't actually know what's going on with your hormones below that. So if you came off it, you might not actually be having one, actually. So that can have a huge effect for females in terms of what's going on in their body. But at a basic level, it's just thinking about when, you know, I would work with a female athlete to understand, well, when is their cycle? Do they even know? You know, because actually, generally, for most people, how it will work will be the first 2 weeks of your cycle, you're probably going to feel on top form. And then towards the week before your period is when, you know, if you have a tempo run to do or an interval session, you're going to find that harder. And that's when your body needs more carbohydrates because of that HPA axis and the pressure that having your menstrual cycle puts on that. So there's lots you can do, and then there's obviously certain vitamins and minerals like magnesium, which are more important around that time as well. So yeah, a big topic.
Probably hear a few women who are watching this going, oh my God, they've just had like an epiphany moment and went, I never even realised that happened. But that's exactly why I think it's such a hot topic, and it's definitely something I'd be really keen to move into in a whole totally separate a separate chat. Now that we've kind of covered quite a lot of broad stuff there, Sarah, given right now the situation we're in, the tendency to be very emotional and the tendency to have routine's important, but bad routine is worse than any routine. And that routine, I had a joke the other day with Finlay that some people's routine could be get up and drink half a bottle of wine. I don't know, which is never going to be a good thing, but people handle stress in very different ways.
Yeah.
What sort of tips do you have right now for athletes or just people in general while they're in lockdown that can help them come out of this with maybe a better body shape, a better understanding of food, a better relationship with food? What would be your kind of tips right now for people who are in this current lockdown we're in?
Okay, so I guess the first thing would be, yes, there are lots of limitations on this, although it's maybe less so now we're out of that initial phase where people were like panic buying all the fruit and vegetables in the supermarket. But is that working on that solid foundation? I would say, first of all, if you're at home and keeping a routine, trying to keep your food routine to 3 solid meals a day. It would be really easy to sleep in a little bit, get up, have coffee, have breakfast like mid-morning, then skip lunch and then snack all through the afternoon. But rather to try and keep that structure of breakfast, lunch, dinner around your training as you would in the normal world, and to structure those meals. This is like super basic, but it's like a good reminder, with some low GI carbohydrates. So that would be like porridge at breakfast or wholemeal toast, a portion of protein, and plenty of fruit and vegetables. And alongside that as well, thinking about healthy fats, which are obviously anti-inflammatory and high in omega-3. So
This is where people get confused now. We're talking about fats and healthy fats, and there's
yeah.
saturated and unsaturated fats. Break it down, Sarah. What are healthy fats and where
Okay.
do they come from?
Yeah, so when I talk about healthy fats, I'm talking about polyunsaturated fats. So they are basically, without getting scientific, there are 2 types of polyunsaturated fats: omega-6 and omega-3. Omega-3 is harder for us to get in our diets; it's not as abundant in food. And that's the anti-inflammatory one. So basically those 2 control inflammatory processes in the body. You want to have more, trying harder to get more omega-3 in your diet, because especially as an athlete, obviously you want to keep inflammation in the body down. It's good for your cardiovascular system, it's good for your nervous system, so it's like a no-brainer. And you get that from oily fish, so salmon, trout, mackerel, sardines. If you're vegan, nuts and seeds, so walnuts, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, hemp. They're all the richest sources. And obviously, if you're vegan, it's going to be harder to get it. So that would be maybe then to be thinking about a supplement. Can be quite useful as well.
Cool.
So yeah, so just on that then is like that first tip is just working on that foundation and keeping the structure around your meals, and that should help you to stay on track. And if you've got that structure there and you're getting loads of colourful fruit and vegetables in your diet, then you're supporting your immune system by getting a lot of vitamins and minerals that your body needs to stay healthy, or at least to be ready to fight infection if it is compromised. So yeah, that would be one thing. Another tip I think would be, obviously racing calendar from a sports point of view. You'll be working on this with your athletes, I'm sure, is kind of out the window at the moment. People don't know what's happening, and is, I suppose, thinking about now is maybe from a training point of view, and when there's this virus is out there and people's immune systems might be slightly compromised, would be really making sure if you're going out and doing long or hard sessions that you are fueled for those sessions, because if you're not, so if you were to go out and do, going back to your chat with Finlay, what should be a 1 hour zone 1 to 2 run harder, and you've done that fasted, it's going to compromise your immune system. So it's really important that you get your fueling right for your sessions. And then, yeah, I guess the last thing would be, I've certainly been doing this as well, is actually just using the time to like try new recipes. So like, rather than going out and buying gels or bars for like a long bike ride, trying some stuff, different things to fuel with. So making your own at home is kind of a nice thing to do. And you obviously, you know what's gone into it as well. So yeah, so my clients find that quite fun. So yeah.
What sort of things? I mean, we talk about obviously food is the best source of fuel when you're doing any form of exercise. From a gut kind of point of view, not a lot of these sports drinks and gels agree with people's stomachs, but of course the gut is quite trainable within.
Yeah.
What sort of alternative? I mean, we've all seen the rice cakes and all of these other things. What sort of things are you sort of pushing your clients towards using as alternatives when they're out there? Alternatives to energy bars and sports,
Yeah.
etc. What are you throwing at them?
Yeah, well, I guess like I was saying, your daily diet and your fueling are two completely different things. So, your daily diet, I'm talking about low GI carbohydrates. For fueling, that's where high GI carbohydrates come into play. So I would usually, and it depends. It depends on the type of session. It depends on the length of it. But like I give people, it's also very personal to the individual in terms of what works for them. So I'll give them suggestions. But I mean, basic things like for if you were going out and doing a long run or a long bike, encouraging people to eat I would usually say as a rule of thumb, every 45 minutes. And then that might be a mix of different types, different sugar sources can work quite well for some people because your body uses different pathways to process different types of sugar. So it makes sense then, obviously, if you are taking in at those different intervals different types of sugar, that is more effective. So I'd maybe say like jelly babies or jelly sweets are useful, and people seem to digest those quite well. So 5 jelly babies within the first 45 minutes for like a long run.
Lovely.
I know they're a favorite. They're like, yeah, it's a bit old school, but I love them. But then other things like saurine loaf. So malt loaf is quite good. Then obviously you've got your naked bars and things like that. But rice cakes, again, you mentioned those. Like rice cakes are good. I think of other things. You can make your own energy balls. So a combination of like dates and oats would usually be quite good because dates are a really quick release source of sugar. So yeah, does that give you some examples?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the protein balls or the energy balls were something that I was on top of that about nearly 10 years ago, where were the people
Yeah.
at Rafa Condor, but even more so nowadays there's a bit more emphasis on potatoes as well, so maybe like honey potatoes.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that I mean, especially for I find that certainly for longer distance stuff where you get sick of sweet stuff. So actually, sometimes alternating savoury and sweet can be quite
Mhm.
useful. And yeah, so like potatoes, like if you've had a roast dinner and you've got leftover potatoes, making like some potato cakes. Sweet potatoes or potatoes work really well. You can also make your own rice cakes as well. So I would be encouraging people if you're making rice cakes for a ride or a run, that would be the time to use white rice rather than brown. So yeah, there's loads of options. There is there's lots of books and things out there that you can buy now where you've got good recipes. One of the ones like for a lot of savoury ideas, I'm sure you've heard of it, is that Feed Zone Portables book.
Mhm.
There's some great ideas in there in terms of that kind of stuff, like sweet potato and rice cakes. So actually, a focus on real food. And as I was talking about that alternating different types of sugar source, that's something to play around with. Some people find that that's beneficial, especially if you're going longer, and you're putting different stuff into your body, so it can be a bit gentler on the digestion. So yeah.
another good thing that in a previous life I used to do was if I was going out for like a steady or kind of fat burning zone 2, zone 1 ride was baked eggs. Literally get a cake tin, plonk some eggs in, put maybe a little bit of salt pepper on them, a little bit of bacon maybe, and bang them in the oven. And
I love that. Did you have all of that on your bike? That's great. I love it.
it was I really enjoyed it because, like you're saying, that you used to get, especially in stage races when it was maybe 10 days and you're doing like 200k a day, you get palate fatigue and you just were sick and tired
Yeah.
of having sugar. You just wanted I don't know, a cheese and pickles sandwich.
Well, yeah, I was just about to say sandwiches. Like I love like jam and peanut butter, like jam and peanut butter sandwich, or cheese and jam, is really great. Um, Savoury flapjacks as well. So actually making flapjacks rather than making them with honey, like with oats with cheese and chili, is quite nice as well as a savoury snack. I quite like that one. Um, someone gave me one of those on a long run last year, and I've been making them. So yeah,
that's brilliant though. It's things that when we think about on in sport or during when we're playing our sport, we generally always go down that really processed, just buy it out a packet when there's actually loads of stuff probably sitting in your cupboards just now. There's probably like tins of I don't know, new potatoes and all this sort of stuff just lying around, and we can really use them on bike or in run, but we just kind of haven't really thought that way. Have you on the website, Sarah? Have you got like recipes and stuff like that people can kind of grab and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do have some on my website. I probably need to update it, but there is a recipe section there which is split with like snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'll try and get some new stuff up there, and then I often I'll have some stuff. I'll post ideas on my Instagram page and things as well. So yeah, there's inspiration out there if people want to have a wee look.
Cool. And that kind of like the last thing that's always comes out in nutrition is supplements. People, especially people who are trying to either get stronger or maybe they've got they want to get a bit leaner. Things get thrown around like L-carnitine, CLA. You can get all these fat burners, and which are probably full of a lot of rubbish. But also you've got people who like vegans as well who don't get good stuff from meat, like some creatine, etc. What's kind of, if we were to go say this top 3 supplements, what would you be looking at for people to go for?
Yeah, so well, the most common things are probably well, actually, those things like L-carnitine, etc. Like generally for me, I if I work with food first and foremost, and get the structure of the diet right around their goals, I generally don't jump to those kinds of supplements. My focus would be much more on vitamin D. Right now, living in Scotland, obviously the NHS recommends vitamin D supplementation over the winter anyway, and that would be a minimum of 1,000 IU dose a day. Right now, obviously, a lot of people are spending more time indoors than they would be normally. So, and vitamin D also helps to balance the immune system, support the immune system, as well as obviously, bone density and mood. So vitamin D right now, I would be recommending that to most people I see.
Yeah.
And the other 2 would be, well, I mentioned magnesium earlier, and I talk about that often with athletes. I think I should say with supplements as well is that most people, most credible nutritionists would be saying, unless there's a known deficiency, then there's not necessarily a need for them. And I would agree with that, but I do think that that's your average person on the street, and not someone who's training 12 to 15 hours a week. And when you are with magnesium, you need magnesium to convert the food that you eat to energy. As part of that process, and also stress uses up your magnesium stores more quickly. You need magnesium to relax your muscles as well. So magnesium is one that I would usually recommend, like a magnesium citrate.
That's what I was going to ask you, Sarah, because there's that many different kinds of magnesium out there. And
yeah, there's different kinds. So usually I quite like, and people seem to respond to it quite well, magnesium citrate, and probably depending on the person, maybe like something between 200 to 300 milligrams daily. But that would be, supporting like a heavy training load. You can also get those magnesium sprays that you can put on topically. And they're quite affordable. I think they're like about a tenner a bottle, and I think you get from about 10 sprays 200 milligrams, and that's a really nice thing to use after a big ride or a big run, because it helps your muscles recover and relax.
Also, quite a lot of research just recently came out that it actually is really good for your sleeping as well. People who are on a magnesium, they've got better, I think it's for the slow wave sleep, I think it is. It makes that and it helps promote that.
Yeah, absolutely. Helps. It can help your sleep. So there's it's my buzzer in my flat going. Luckily, someone else is in. There's also, I was talking earlier about that HPA axis, so the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis, and the nervous system. Magnesium has a big role to play in that as well, in terms of balancing the nervous system and helping people relax, which is why it can benefit your sleep. So a really, really important one, and often overlooked in favor of those other types of supplements you were talking about. So those would be my top two. But then probably if I was working, especially with you mentioned vegans, a vegan athlete, maybe looking at a really decent multivitamin that has a good dose of B vitamins in it, because B vitamins again are really important for the nervous system. So B6, 9 and 12. And if you're a vegan, there are specific nutrients which you need to pay more attention to. B12 is one of them, because you only get it from animal products. But there are a number of others like zinc, iron. So, and usually what I would do is work with somebody to make sure that they're getting plenty of that in their diet through the foods they eat, but then maybe supporting that with a multi or a supplement as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a bit more difficult when you are vegan. You've got to obviously think about the sources of stuff. So is it more leafy greens or etc. But that kind of is another way of thinking about how your body can get nutrients, but not from your usual animal products, which obviously is a massive thing when you are either plant-based.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, you can. It's maybe that's another topic we could talk about in the future. But yeah, I mean, there's like things as well, like, so iron, obviously, if you're not having meat and eggs and dairy, what foods do you need to eat to get iron in your diet? And your whole grains, oats, brown rice, beetroot, those sorts of things. But pairing iron-rich foods with vitamin C, for example, helps the absorption of the iron. So there's like wee hacks like that, that if you think about the structure of a meal, and what you're pairing those foods with, can help the absorption. So that can be quite useful. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Sarah, that's an unbelievable amount of information we went through in the.
Hopefully, I've not overwhelmed you all.
No, I think it just adds to the credibility of what you're doing, because you're so embedded in the science of it. And of course, you spoke there about hacks and stuff like that. And there's many different avenues we could take this down the future. But if people want to reach out to you, Sarah, how can they get a hold of you?
So you mentioned my website. So it's just thryvenutrition.co. Thryve Nutrition, I'm sure you'll post this up, but it's spelt quite unusually, Thryve rather than I. I'm also on Instagram at Thryve Nutrition as well, and on Facebook too. So you can get in touch with me, like message or email via my website on any of those channels. So
And if any of those don't work, feel free to get in touch with us at info@watchyourmeta.com, and we can pass you on our preferred nutrition expert, Thryve. But Sarah, thank you once again for your time today. It's been great to dig into some stuff and learn a few new things from my side as well. So thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to having you in future episodes. Take care.
Thanks for having me.